Well, hello again, and we are ready to welcome our second speaker, Reverend Tim Moore. I'm so excited to hear from him. Tim is the founder and the head pastor of the X Church, now in Canal, Winchester. He and his wife, Laura Lee, founded the X Church in 2003. It's the year I graduated high school, Tim. They ran pre-COVID around 12 to 1,300. And so, you know, he has cultivated that from 2000 to 3 and grow that. But one of the coolest things about this church is they've seen 5,400 people make a decision to follow Jesus Christ from their ministry. It's so powerful. 1,700 baptisms since they have founded the church, and it's just God is blessing them mightily. They just opened a brand new facility, and if you could imagine doing that in 2020, and I know Tim's going to talk a little bit about that in the struggles and just God showing up and all of the blessings there. So also, Tim is a OCU alumnus, graduated in 2004, and he was also awarded the OCU Alumnus of the Year in 2019, so I'm super excited, and thank you so much for being here, Tim, and just share what God's laid on your heart.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael, and it's an honor to be able to share with all of you guys today. I was given the topic of church growth in a post-Christian world, and I'm not so sure that I'm an expert in church growth. I consider myself a little bit more of a practitioner. And one of the things I assume is that many of you who are tuning into this now, or if you're watching this at some other time, that you're leaning into this because you're in ministry, whether you're a pastor, you're on staff somewhere, and that you have a desire to see your church grow. And I think that's incredible. I think it's amazing to have a desire to want to see your church grow. I don't know anybody that's ever led a business, got into ministry that did not want their organization, their church to grow. I think we all want to see growth in our life. We want to see personal growth. We want to see organizational growth in our lives. I will say that there are a few people in ministry that I've run into every once in a while that don't seem to be as interested in growth of their church because they find it much easier just to manage if it stays small. But I'm just going to assume that's not you today. That if you're actually making time for this broadcast to be a part of this, that it's because there's something inside of you that wants to see your ministry go to the next level. And I hope just to be able to share a few things from my life and my experience that might be able to help you. Here's what I want to say. I did not get into ministry. I was not called into ministry for church growth. So I want to just say it up front. And I wanted to kind of challenge you and hopefully you as well were not called into ministry or did not feel like God brought you into ministry because of church growth. And I say that because I believe that there are people who do go into ministry because of the allure of church growth. Because they go into a larger church and they see the space and they see the ministry and they see the impact and the influence that some pastors have and think, I want that. If I could just humbly say that if that is your motive and desire for ministry, you're probably not going to make it. Because all I know is that when God called me into ministry, it wasn't for church growth, but it was for a specific purpose. In fact, I'll never forget where I was when I was reading the Bible. I was reading John 15, verse 16, when I really sensed a real call on my life. God used that verse to really clearly speak to what he was calling me to do. John 15, 16 says that you did not choose me, Jesus said to his disciples, but I chose you. And I've appointed you to go and bear fruit that remains. And I remember that moment where God called me to ministry, called me to serve him. And you know what my desire was? It wasn't church growth. It was to see lives changed forever. It was transformation. That is my passion for ministry. It's not about I want a large church. I want big buildings. Can I just tell you? For someone who's kind of been in this journey for a while, who has experienced some of these things, they're a headache. They really are a headache, but I'm just telling you, my passion and my fuel is to see God's kingdom expanded. It's to see lives transformed. And if you have that same heart and that same desire, then I believe that you are positioned so that God can use you. Now, let me tell you this. I believe that church growth is a byproduct of healthy churches and healthy leaders. I want church growth, don't get me wrong, but it is not my main focus. And so today what I want to do in the time that we have for the next 3 hours, I want to share with you just some real practical things. It's not 3 hours, sorry. It's just so hard to get humor across on the camera sometimes. But I want to share with you just some real practical handles. If you're in ministry, some things that maybe in your context would help you see your ministry grow, help you see your reach grow, and ultimately, I pray the kingdom of God grow and expand. So I want to share these things. Before I jump into them, I want to just kind of, let's see if we can get on a level playing field. I want to talk about just a few core assumptions that I'm going to have going into this. Okay, I've got 3 core assumptions that I just want you to, I want to say we're going to use this as our baseline. The first one is this. I'm going to assume that you and we have right motives. I'm going to assume that, like I was saying, that we have the right motive for ministry. Because I believe that if we have the wrong motive in ministry, I'm not so sure that God's going to bless that. And so I just want to say, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that your heart and your mind and the reason why you're in ministry, the reason why you're leading, the reason why you're doing it is for the right reasons, that you had a call maybe like I had. It might be different, but it was similar, that you had a passion or a burden that it caused you to go into ministry, to serve God with the rest of your life, and that your desire is kingdom-minded, not just your own church. I think that's so significant. I think God's looking for people who are kingdom-minded, not just for their own church or their own name. So I'm going to assume that today we all have the right motives. I'm also going to make an assumption that you care about spiritual growth. One of the things that I don't love and I don't care to argue about, and I hear this all the time, is that some people will say, well, you only care about numeric growth. Here at our church, we care about spiritual growth. Can I just say that is just an awful argument to have? And why is it that it is one or the other? Why can't it be both and? I just want to have this core assumption. I care about spiritual growth for the people in my church. I want to see them develop in their faith. As we just heard, discipleship matters. And so I care about it, but I feel like we need to stop pitting those two against each other. Like if you only care about spiritual growth, you don't actually care about numbers. Listen, we all care about numbers. If you're saying, well, I'm so spiritual, I don't care about numbers, and you're a pastor, then do me a favor. I don't ever want you to count the number of people that attend your church, and don't ever count your offering. You see, the truth is, we do care about numbers. And so let's not make that argument. I think it's useless. I want to see people grow in their faith, but I also want to reach people and see God's kingdom grow. And I want to see our church grow. And then the third thing that's just a core assumption is the God factor. Like, let's just be honest that God can step into your church situation, your ministry, at any time in a supernatural way and cause things to happen. I think we all know that. I've seen that. There are ways that God can step in, and you'll be in a place, and I've been in this place, where I'm sitting there scratching my head and saying, I don't know why it's working, or I don't know why God is blessing this. And I just want us to, what I want to do today is I want to kind of remove the super Christian answer, right? The super spiritual answer. How do we see our church grow? Well, you need to pray a lot. If you just really, if we get on your knees and you pray maybe 2 or 3 hours a day, that then God's going to show up and do something. Can I just say, I believe in the power of prayer. We believe it in our church. You should pray. I want God to show up every time I preach. I want God to show up every time we gather. Like, I am begging for that. But if I could just say, let's just assume that God is in this and that there is a God factor. I love this quote by Mark Batterson. I don't think he actually came up with this quote, but I think it's so good. It's this: we should pray like it depends on God, but we should work like it depends on us. And so there's a God factor. We're not denying that. But what I want to talk about is us. Like, what is the thing that you and I as leaders can do that God wants to use to help shape our ministries and to see them grow, especially in a post-Christian world? Speaking of post-Christian world, I'm going to share some things today that are really like life lessons. In fact, I'm going to share with you just 8 things that can help your church grow today. These are 8 lessons that I have found in my life that really, that my experience has really helped me see our church grow. Now, let me just preface this and say, you're probably not going to find all of these in the Bible, okay? And so if you're looking for a message straight out of the Bible today as we talk about church growth, I apologize, and if this is not worth the cost of admission, just go ahead and message Michael and ask for a refund. But I want to talk about how to grow your church in a post-Christian world. You see, if I were going to grow a church in the first century, I would probably look at the New Testament. I think it'd be an incredible roadmap for some things that you could do. But we're in the 21st century. And though these things, the Bible is super important, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying there are some practical things. These are life lessons that I have learned in ministry over the years that I want to share with you, and I hope that they encourage you. I hope they inspire you. And here's the thing, I'm going to have 8 of them. And here's what I know. All 8 are not going to matter to you. Not all 8 are going to be like light bulb moments, revelatory. Here's my hope is that maybe 1 or 2 things that I say today might be something that you're going to go and you're going to process and you're going to pray and you're going to allow the Holy Spirit begin to speak to you and through your team, and you can dialogue together about it, and maybe it's going to be a catalyst for church growth in your ministry. So 8 things that can help your church grow. Let me give you the first one. I encourage you to write these down and maybe think about them. Maybe even pray about them, right? 8 things. The first one is this. Before your church will grow, you must grow. I'm just going to let that sit in for a moment. Before your church will grow, you must grow. I discovered this the hard way. We started our church, as Michael said, in 2003. We had a small team, 3 families, 3 core families with a few relatives started our church back in 2003 on Easter Sunday of 2003. I did not really have, I've been in church most of my entire life. My dad was a pastor. I've been around ministry for a long time, but we really wanted to create a church that would reach people that didn't go to church. We wanted to create a church for the unchurched. We wanted to create a place where people who had questions about God, not everybody who was convinced about God, would want to come and be part of a community. And we started this church in 2003, and the truth is, I had known ministry for a long time in a small church, but I didn't really know how to reach people. I didn't really know what it was going to look like. And oh, by the way, I was young. This was my first time stepping in and being a pastor. I was working a full-time job for the state of Ohio as a network engineer. I was still in school at Ohio Christian University in the AIM program, full-time, finishing my degree, while I'm cutting my teeth as a pastor. And so I'm learning how to preach, I'm learning how to lead, I'm learning how to do all that. And I look back on those years and I think somehow God blessed our little small group. We weren't even a large small group. We were a small group where we began to grow over the next few years. I would say in spite of us. The reason why I say that is because kind of a funny story that I think it's kind of ironic that I'm here talking about church growth today, because when we launched our church in 2003 on Easter Sunday and had no idea what we were doing or how to do it, then on that Sunday, 1 family came. 1 family showed up. Now, can you imagine today, in the culture that we're in and the environment we're in and what we have today, that if you were going to launch your church and 1 family came, you would be devastated. In fact, you'd probably think it's time to hang it up. This is not what I'm called to do. I think I was so dumb and naive at the time. I'm like, yes, 1 family came. It's not just us. And so our church grew, but really slowly. Again, I'm working full-time outside the church. I'm bivocational. I'm not getting paid. I mean, this was just a dream to start a church to reach people. And the church over the next 3 or 4 years grew to about 80 people. We had expanded a little bit. We were in a terrible location. And finally, by the time we got to 2007, the group, the launch team said, hey, we think that you need to go full-time. And so I made a decision to go full-time April 1st in 2007. Yes, I started into ministry on April Fool's Day. I don't know what that says about me, but I went in with so much anticipation that now that I'm full-time, that I'm going to step in and our church is just going to take off. It is just going to grow. And let me tell you what happened. Nothing. Our church didn't grow. We weren't getting any bigger. I'm getting more and more frustrated because I had this whole picture in my mind that I'm leaving it all behind. I'm going full-time into ministry, and now we're going to see things happen, and things didn't happen. In that year, I got so incredibly frustrated. I'll be honest, I got frustrated with God. I'm like, God, why did I just leave my job, my career that I had in information technology to go do this if this is what it was going to be? And in that moment, I never forget this so clearly. God spoke to me that year, and he said, Tim, you're proud. I was like, what do you mean I'm proud? He said, you're proud. You think you know what you're doing. I've been around ministry my entire life, so I knew that, but I didn't know where God wanted to take us. And so in the moment, and I even confessed this to their team, I said, guys, I got to tell you, I think I'm too proud. No, you're not. I was like, no. I feel like God's humbling me. And in that moment, here's what I did. I began to reach out for help. I began to grow myself. I realized that this was not going to happen and our church was not going to go anywhere if I did not grow as a person, as a leader, and as a pastor. And so in that moment, I just began to consume everything I could. I began to read books. I began to follow churches. I began to find information about how do you grow a church from over 100 people. I'm learning all kinds of little things that were like, hey, one church said that until you're a church of 500 people, every first-time guest should get a handwritten note from the lead pastor. I was like, okay, so I'm doing handwritten notes to the lead pastors. As a lead pastor, I'm doing all of these things. And all of a sudden, what happened in that year is that something unlocked in me. Something in my leadership, something in me as a pastor began to grow. And now today, can I just tell you that I consume so much material. I consume books, podcasts, sermons. I'm connected to pastors of larger churches that I'm always asking questions, and I'm constantly trying to grow. And here's what I'm trying to say. No matter where you are in church ministry, if you got 100 people, you got 400 people, you got 1,000 people, it doesn't matter. Your church will not grow beyond your capacity to lead it. Your church will not grow if you do not grow. And I believe that leaders are learners. And you know, it's tough for me to do that. I don't love reading. But even this year, I've probably read at least 12 books, and I don't love reading. But I feel like I have to learn so that I can go to the next level. And every time we have gotten like to a place as a ministry where I feel stuck, the very first place I always look is internal. I always say, God, am I being the lid for this ministry? And so that's the first point. Before your church must grow, you must grow. And so I just want to encourage you, what are you doing to increase your leadership capacity? Okay? So growing church is led by a growing leader. Let me give you a second one. A second thought is this. A strong vision is memorable, repeatable, and relatable. A strong vision, if you're going to be a visionary, you're going to lead with vision, it should be memorable, it should be repeatable, and it should be relatable. Again, when I'm just getting started in ministry, I didn't know how to put into terms what I was feeling for the church. I didn't understand how important vision was for people. I just thought people were looking for a church. I thought people were just going to come and show up. And at the time, we didn't really have any clear vision other than we want to reach people. And so the first several years of our church, let me just tell you this, and maybe you've been in this place, and that's okay, but I was living on borrowed vision. It wasn't personal vision. I felt a personal calling, but I had not created a personal vision or mission for our church to follow. And so what inspired us to start this church was actually a book that was written by Rick Warren, pastor of Saddleback Church. Maybe you've read it. It's an older book now, but it was called, what was it called? Purpose-Driven Church. Thank you. I was thinking Purpose-Driven Life in my head. Purpose-Driven Church. And I remember reading that and just it captivated my heart. That's what I want our church to be about. And so we had no idea how to do it. So here's what we did. We took their mission statement, which by the way is like a paragraph, all 5 of his purposes, and we took that statement and we changed like 3 words and it became our mission statement. We literally ripped off Rick Warren's mission statement. And that's what we did. And we taught his model and we taught his method and all these bases because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't have a personal vision for leading our church. In that first year, though, when I was it was probably one of the harder years of ministry. I literally, I was so frustrated. I got depressed, all these things. But God actually used that really difficult time in my life to develop within me a vision for our church, a mission for our church. And what came out of that season was a fire that was connected to a mission that I could give our church that was memorable, it was repeatable, and it was relatable because people need a vision to follow. And so what came out of that, what's transpired to become our current mission statement at X Church, which, by the way, long story, we used to be Crossroads, and so there was a connection to this. But our mission became this: helping people get on the path to God. We just simplified. We said, listen, it might seem overly simple, but it really encompassed my heartbeat for our church, that we want to help people get on the path to God. We want to help people intersect their life with Him and see their life change and begin to walk a new path. And so we made this, I just came up with this really, really simple mission statement, and I began to preach it. I began to teach. I began to say, hey, we're going to take steps toward this, and if it is not going to fulfill that particular mission, we're not doing it. And so we came with this laser focus of helping people get on the path to God. You know what? People knew it. People could quote it. People could tell you. If someone said, what's your church about? Well, we want to help you get on the path to God. And we began to see clarity come together when it comes to vision. I'll give you just a little train of thought of what I've seen happen in our church when it comes to vision. I believe that clarity leads to alignment. Alignment leads to buy-in, and buy-in leads to growth. Let me say it again. Clarity leads to alignment. When your vision is clear, when people know what you're about and who you are as a church and what matters to you as the leader, when there's clarity, then all of a sudden you get alignment. People that come and they go through your membership class, whatever you have, they kind of go, I like this church. Okay, this is what this church is about. We keep it simple. This is where we're focused. And all of a sudden you get alignment. Now everybody starts to kind of go, okay, well, we know why we're doing these outreach efforts, and we know why we're doing these things, because we're going to help somebody else get on the path to God. And clarity leads to alignment. Alignment will lead to buy-in. When there is alignment and everybody sees it in the culture and everybody here is going, oh my gosh, this is what we're about. We're excited to be about this. Then all of a sudden there's buy-in that comes with it. And buy-in leads to growth. Why? Because when people get excited about the vision, when people get excited about your church, guess what they do? They tell their friends. They invite people. You ought to come with me. Come with me to church. There's buy-in, and it leads to growth. There's a verse in Proverbs 29:18 that says, where there is no vision or revelation, people cast off restraint. In other words, where there's not something to clearly follow, people are going to go in whatever direction. And so if you're kind of the leader of your organization, can I just encourage you, you need to have a strong vision. And it shouldn't be complicated. And people should be able to look in very easily and go, I think I know what we're about. I know what this church is about. I know what drives him or her as the primary leader. We saw this play out. It was kind of a funny moment. We had, this was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, we had an organization come in to help us with a campaign. And they came in, and one of the things that they do when they would actually get together in front of the church, or you'd speak, and there was a meeting where you had a few hundred people that came to it. And he asked everybody a simple question. He just said, hey, you guys, what is the mission of your church? And without a fail, without a beat missing, almost every single person in that room just jumped up and they said, helping people get on the path to God. He told me afterward, he said, I have never heard such unison in a single church when I said, what is the mission of this church? Every single person basically said together. Why? Because we talk about it, because we teach it, because the vision is memorable. It's repeatable, and it's relatable to life. I want to be a part of helping someone meet God. I want to be a part of that. In the last few years, I've actually moved from just a mission to adding a vision. We used to only have a mission, but we added a vision for the season that we're in as a church, and I cast some vision for the next probably 10 years or however long it takes, and I said, guys, I want to bring into more clarity the focus for our church as we move forward with a building campaign and all this stuff. And if you ask most people in our church that have been there for at least a year, they'll probably quote it to you. Our vision is really simple right now. It's reaching thousands, giving away millions. That's what we're doing. We're reaching thousands, giving away millions. It's simple. It's memorable. It's repeatable. It's relatable. In other words, we want to reach thousands of people for Christ, and we're going to take steps to do that. And we want to be so generous, we want to give away millions of dollars. We take 10% of what comes into the church and we use it to bless our community, to help people, to serve ministries. And my desire, my dream is that one day we're going to be giving away over $1 million every single year back into the community, back into ministries around the world. And so everybody knows it. This is our vision right now. And it is simple, it's clear, and it's something that people can hold on to. And so I guess I would ask this question. If I were to walk into your space and I were to go up to 5 or 10 random people and I would say to them, hey, what's this church all about? What's the vision of this church? What's the mission of this church? Do you think they would tell me what it is? Do they know it? Would they be able to say it? Even if it's not word for word, would they be able to say it? So that's something to think about because I believe people follow vision. So that's the second one. Okay, let me give you a third one today. Preach Jesus unapologetically. Now, I know my good friend Pastor Matt's going to come up in a little bit and talk about preaching, so I'm going to steal his thunder for a moment because I go first. But I would say this, preach Jesus unapologetically. When I, again, first got started, again, so much of this is what I learned early in ministry. I used to think that it was on me to convince people that they should want to follow God. I did as a pastor, early, young pastor, just getting started. And so in my preaching, I would basically think to myself as I'm creating messages that I need to convince you that a life with God is better than your life without God. And so I would think of how to eloquently kind of say that, and it's kind of a subtle but a nice way, say, you know, your life is like this now, but it'd be like this if you had God in it. And I would soften the parts of the message that were a little bit offensive. You know, the kind of things that were real direct. I mean, Jesus said some things like, if anyone wants to follow me, right? Dr. Friedman said that. If anyone wants to follow me, you must deny yourself, take up your cross daily, and follow after me. I mean, that's kind of intense. And so I'm going to focus on just, Jesus loved people, and God wants to love you. And so I really thought it was on me to kind of downplay some of the more offensive and clear things about Jesus early in the ministry. And then one day, a pastor that I respected, a very large ministry that I followed from a distance, he put out a blog post as we were getting ready for an Easter. And in his blog post, I would read and consume. He said this. He said, Pastor, it is our job to preach Jesus unapologetically, and leave the results to him. And then he shared this verse. And this verse, I don't know, God used it and it rocked my world as a preacher. It rocked my world as a pastor, wanting to see my church grow, but trying to figure out how to do this. And it's Romans 1:16. It says, Paul said these words, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel." I love this because it is the power of God unto salvation for those who believe, first for the Jews and then the Gentiles. And there was something about hearing that verse that just, it cut me to the core. Because, see, I thought it was on me to convince people. I thought it was in my hands, my power to convince people that they should want to follow God. And I was deeply convicted, and at the same time, a light bulb went off, and I realized something, that I was not considering the power of God when I preached the gospel. When I just clearly show them who Jesus is, what it means to follow him, which means surrender your entire life, which means to leave your life of sin, which means it is better to invite Jesus to be the Lord of your life. And I was convicted so much so that I repented right there before God. I repented for not preaching the gospel, not preaching Jesus unapologetically. And so I just want to encourage you, I guess, if you're in a place where you're constantly thinking, man, in my culture, in my city, I've got to preach a certain way, especially in a post-Christian world where I've got to water it down, or I'm just going to soften the edges a little bit. Can I just encourage you? You are removing the power of God from your preaching. When you preach the gospel, here's what I say now, and this is a verse that has become a life verse for me. I think to myself before I go out and preach, I think, when I preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, that the power of God's going to be released. And I cannot even measure the impact of what that means. And so I guess I would just challenge you, are you preaching Jesus unapologetically? I believe we need it more now in a post-Christian world than ever before. And I believe people are hungry for real truth, and they want somebody to tell them the way it really is and not water it down and not soften the edges. So I would encourage you, preach Jesus unapologetically. The fourth thing that will help your church grow, and it's kind of connected, but it's a little different, I want to say this: preach to the empty seat. Preach to the empty seat. I think one of the temptations that we have in ministry is to preach to those who are already in the room, right? Because I got in a ministry to preach and to see people grow in their faith, all of those things. But what happens is when you get into a room and you know most of the people in the room, and you know their life and you know where they are and you kind of build a connection with them, the temptation is, I want to preach to them. And there's nothing wrong with that, okay? In a way, we need to do that. I want to preach to the people who are in the room. The problem is that sometimes we will tend to shape our messages, shape our preaching to the people who are already convinced, the people who are already believe what maybe you believe, the people who are already there. We will shape our preaching specifically for them. I did this a lot as an early pastor. I would preach to the people who are in the room. When we had a small church of, maybe 70 adults, I knew most of them. I knew their situation. So what's the point in preaching to someone who's maybe addicted to a drug? What's the point in maybe preaching to people, who are destitute? What's the point in preaching to someone who doesn't believe? Everybody in the room already believes. So the tendency is I'm going to preach what they need to hear. I'm going to preach to them. But if I could just challenge that for just a moment today, maybe you never heard this before. But what does it look like for you to preach to the people who aren't in the room? What does it look like for you to preach to the people you want to reach? Who is it in your community that you want to reach? Can I tell you who I wanted to reach? I wanted to reach the broken. I wanted to reach the lost. I want to reach the atheists and the agnostic and the nun and I want to reach the person who's caught up in a lifestyle of sin, someone who is addicted to drugs and alcohol, who's lost in the world of choose your sexuality. Like, I want to reach those people. Can I just say something? If you want to reach those people as well, you need to begin preaching to them even before they're in the room. If you would just begin to say, I'm going to preach to them and I'm going to talk to them. Can I tell you what, when I first did this, when I first had this mental shift where I was like, wait a minute, if I'm going to reach people with the gospel and I'm going to preach the gospel unapologetically, but everybody in the room is already saved, what am I doing? And so I was challenged by that, and I said, you know what? No, I am going to preach the gospel. And so I would do an invitation, but I'm pretty sure everybody's already convinced. And it felt weird. But guess what it did? It sent a message to everybody that was already in the room that there is space for their friends and their family, their coworkers, their classmates that don't know Jesus. It sent a message to everybody that they knew and loved that didn't know Jesus, that there is something for them in this space, that there's something in this message that they need to hear. By the way, I would just also say this. A lot of times we assume that most of the people in the room are convinced and believe what we believe because they go to church. I'll make an argument. There's a good chance that maybe even half of the people that go to your church, they don't even really follow Jesus. Not the way you think. And so if that's the case, then it's going to do them good. So here's what I would say. The people that you want to reach, preach to them. And it's going to feel awkward. It's going to feel weird. But you are setting the culture, and you're going to create an atmosphere where everybody says, oh my gosh, if he's going to do a series about that, I'm going to go invite so-and-so because I think they need to hear this. If you would begin to kind of set your preaching up to the empty seat, you're going to reach the people that are in the seats, but you're also going to reach their friends and their family. And so one of the things that we do every year is we will intentionally, based on the flow of the yearly calendar and the season, and there's certain times when people just come to church, there's certain times when it's more ideal to reach people to come to church, is that we kind of divide up our sermon series. I'll divide them up on two basic categories. I'll do some series that are all about reaching people. And so I will intentionally talk about certain things, and we'll let everybody know, hey, this is a series for you to bring your friends. I mean, all of them are series they can bring their friends. We create an atmosphere for every week, but this is specifically, here's what we're going to deal with. And people go, oh, my friend, my family, my sister, she needs something like this. I'm going to ask them to tune in. So we'll do what we call a Reach People series, and then there's times where the focus might be growing people. And so depending on the rhythm of the year and when, we're going to put some where we're like, and by the way, if I'm doing a message that is clearly for people who are already Christ followers, and I'm going to call them to something and I'm going to challenge them, I will still speak to the person in the room that does not believe. I will say things at the beginning of the message. Hey, listen, if you're here today and you don't believe in God, or you're an atheist, you're agnostic, maybe you're saying, I'm not sure I believe the Bible like you do, and I'm not a follower of Jesus. I'm just checking this out. I got invited here. I got drugged here. I don't even know that this is something for me. Then I just want to say, I'm so glad you're here. Like we say all the time that this is a community where you can belong before you believe. And we're glad you're here. And oh, by the way, what I'm going to say today is really more for people who follow Jesus. So guess what? You get a pass. Just got to relax a little bit. If anything I say is helpful for you, hey, great. Eat the fish, spit out the bones. But I'm saying today, I'm going to speak directly to these people. And sometimes I'll do that. And so what I'm doing is I'm acknowledging, hey, I'm glad you're here. And I'm glad you're in the room. And so if you want to reach people, certain people in the community, begin to preach to the empty seat. Let me give you number 5. Number 5 is this: systems sustain growth. Systems sustain growth. Now, what I have found in ministry is that it's certain kinds of programming sometimes, or events we do for the community that tend to attract growth. I have found, and you kind of discover this in your area, like what is it that maybe we send a postcard for a specific series on relationships, whatever, you may do, that might attract growth. But let me tell you something, systems actually sustain growth. Now here's what I know, if you're in ministry, you probably did not get into ministry because of systems. You probably are like, man, I just feel called into ministry because I just love working in church management software, and I love sitting at my desk and for doing emails and phone calls and follow-up stuff. The reality is that's the kind of stuff that really makes ministry that nobody ever sees. And you know that. If you're in ministry, you spend all week doing administrative things and preparing spaces and doing all these things. It's not so sexy. And then we have ministry in church when people show up and they love the atmosphere and the worship and everything. And then they're like, oh, I would love to be in ministry one day. Do you know how many people are shocked when they find out it's not like Sunday morning? It's not like your weekend experiences throughout the week? No, because it's work. It's work and it's hard. And I got into ministry for people. I got into ministry so that I could love and care for people and connect with people because I want to see people's lives change. I didn't get into ministry to work on a computer. I didn't get into ministry because I wanted to be in systems all day long. Here's the reality. Systems aren't sexy. I get that. There's nothing sexy about computer systems and systems to manage stuff, but let me just say this. Systems are what sustain growth. In fact, I'll say this when it comes to church growth. The larger your church gets, the harder it will be to sustain growth. A lot of people think it's just like a snowball and like, okay, once we get over the hump of 200 people and 500 is going to... Let me just say it this way. I believe it's easier to double your church when you're 100 than when you're 1,000. Why is that? It's because it's harder to care for all those people. And that's what we're really called to do. We're called to love and care and lead people, and you can't do that when you have a really, really large church, or you want to grow your church larger without a system to help with that care and with that growth. Systems really sustain growth. We implemented a church management software probably when we were running 300 to 400 people. Again, this was years ago. Today, everybody starts with one. Maybe you have. Hopefully you have. They weren't as cost effective as they were back then. But I remember when we implemented church management software and we created systems for everything. So if you want to check your kids in, there's a system for it. If you're going to be a first-time guest, there should be a system for it. And if you're just going to go, well, first-time guests just come and we connect with them and we meet with them, and then, we hope they come back the next time. And if they do, we have a membership class, and hopefully they'll come to a membership class. We'll pass a clipboard for them to sign up, or they can sign up online or whatever. Can I just encourage you, if you want to see sustained growth in your ministry, you need a system and a process for everything that you do. Every single thing you do. You need a church management database software so that you can keep information and you can track communication and track conversation. As I said, if you have first-time guests, you should have a system or a process for every first-time guest that walks through the door. We have a system for every first-time guest. You show up, we encourage you to stop by an area or text in a certain code. They get a response back from us. They get a handwritten postcard. They might get an email that week of follow-up. Hey, would you meet us again here a second time? Meet us again a second time. We're having conversations about an experience that we have once a week that we would love to connect with them on a deeper level. And so we have a complete system. You should have a system or a process for everything you do to care for people. Do you have a process or a system for starting groups, for finding leaders, for developing people, for serving and how people serve and how you communicate with them? Do you have a process for giving and notifying people when they do give? Do you have a process for all of these things? If you don't, let me just encourage you, and I don't know what size church you're in and what you have, you should have a process or a system for everything because it will help you sustain growth. You know, I think all of us, we want God to add to our number. We want to see our churches grow. But I think to what Jesus said, that unless you're faithful with little, you can't be trusted with more. And why would God send more people to you if you are not prepared to care for them? I want you to consider that. You say, oh, no, we're good. I want you to think of it like this way. And here's a simple question to ask. Do you have effective systems in place to manage double your current attendance? Let me ask that question. Whatever your attendance looks like, if you are meeting in person right now, do you have systems in place to manage double? And I believe that if you will actually do, and it's hard work, the administrative hard work, believe it or not, you're going to see results on the other end. You really are. One of the things that we talk about a lot in church ministry, you probably heard it, is we see people slip out the back door, right? People kind of fall away. I've seen that happen in our church over the years, and it breaks my heart, all because maybe someone dropped the ball. We didn't have a system in place to make sure that we were able to lead and care for them well. And so that's the fifth one. Systems sustain growth. Here's the sixth one. Your tolerance for pain will determine your potential for growth. Your tolerance for pain will determine your potential for growth. You know, when our church was smaller and we kind of just operated as a team, I didn't really feel the pain of leadership. It wasn't until I went full-time and then I started leading. And the truth is, you can be in the seat of the leader and not actually be leading. There's a difference. But the moment you start to lead, you're going to find out very quickly who are the people that are really following. You're going to find out, by the way, everybody may love everything that you do until you make a decision that someone doesn't like or they have a different preference. And the moment you do that, you'll find out whether or not people are really leading. There's a great book by a guy named Dr. Sam Chan. He wrote this book called Leadership Pain. I would encourage you, maybe a great resource if you feel like you're in a painful season in ministry, wanting to give up. But he speaks to this idea of leadership equals pain. And there's a quote in his book that is so true, and it's about growth. He said this: growth equals change, change equals loss, loss equals pain, so inevitably growth equals pain. He connects growth to pain because anytime there's growth, there has to be change. If you're in a situation where it's like, I want to see our ministry grow, let me tell you, you're going to have to change some things. And anytime you change something in the church, you can expect kickback. You can expect loss. You can expect somebody is not going to be happy with the decision you made. Okay? It just happens every single time. My dad used to say it a little bit different when we would work out when I was younger. He would say this: no pain, you know it, no gain. And I think sometimes we can understand that when it comes to working out, but we don't understand that when it comes to ministry. We don't understand that it is full of pain. What we do is based on relationships, and it's personal. Over the years, I've experienced quite a bit of pain in leadership, and I imagine that many of you have. I was thinking about just some of the things that we've experienced in our journey of growth and change. In every single campaign that we've ever done as a church, we have lost people. Every single one. I don't care how exciting it is. I don't know how great the opportunity it is. Our very first campaign that we ever did, we actually moved out of that space that we had rented in 2007, but in 2008, We bought this piece of property in a small town, Lithopolis, and it was in that process of raising money. We had this. It was an all-in. We had to raise a certain amount of money. That one of the founding members of our church, of the three kind of core families, one of the founding families of our church, a guy who was in charge of our finances, a guy who was part of the elder board, a guy that was probably one of the largest givers in our church, said to me, hey, we're going to leave the church. This is in the middle of a campaign as we signed a contract for a piece of property, and we had to come up with money in order to close on it. And if you don't think that's painful, we're talking about people who were friends for a long time, and you find yourself without those relationships anymore. It's painful. I can't tell you how many times we've experienced it. When we change things aesthetically in the building, we bought a new facility, and we went in, and one of the first things that we did was we painted the ceiling black. Man, I'll tell you what, people got mad. They thought we turned into a devil-worshiping church because we painted the ceiling black. It's funny, most spaces, theatrical spaces are black, but no, we painted the ceiling black. We got rid of the pews, and we got these chairs. People got mad. We had people leave the church because of some of the aesthetic changes we did to match the vision that we had. This was back in 2008. We've had staff members leave, and the moment they leave, and maybe because you let them go or they quit, and you give them a severance package, and then they turn around and on social media and other things, they launch an assault against me or against our church. That's happened to us, and not just once. I've gotten blamed for failures of staff members. I imagine some of you can identify with that. I have been called prosperity gospel preacher because I preach what God's word says about finances. I've been told my preaching is too shallow. I've been told that it is just flat out deceptive. I have had people give me words from God as they leave our church in such a loving way. It's like, hey, why don't you go, God, I don't know, I was just reading the Bible and just God gave me this passage for you, and you can read it on your own. Ezekiel chapter 13, it just is where, if you don't know what Ezekiel 13 is, go open up and read it. I remember reading that as I'm driving home, talking about false prophets, and I'm like, holy cow, we just hugged, and you just said how much you loved our church, and there was no, I'm like, what is going on? I could go on, and everything, even just this year in the middle of a pandemic, dealing with COVID, in the middle of a massive building project that has taken everything we can, and I'm not the only one, a lot of pastors have experienced this. Not only have we lost people, I lost 2 people resigned from the board, 1 family left the church who had been with us for probably, 15 years. Really not even a conversation. I guess what I'm trying to say is this. If you don't want to feel pain, then your church will stay where it is. But if you want your church to grow, you better be able to embrace pain. I really believe that your tolerance for pain is directly connected to your potential for growth. And until you're willing to embrace that there's pain that goes with leadership, there's loneliness that goes with being in that seat, you're never going to be able to experience the kind of growth that you hope and pray and desire for. And so I'll leave you with this question on that point. What is that one decision that you've been avoiding because you've been afraid of the fallout? What's that one decision that you know is the right thing to do for your church, but you just don't have the guts to do it? Maybe today God's going to inspire you and say, it's time to do it. Number 7 is this. I'm going to run out of time. Number 7 is this. Embrace the digital revolution. Embrace the digital revolution. I know my desire to get into ministry was not to talk to cameras, but it was to see people. Which is so ironic, just even in a moment like this where pretty much there's very few of you in the room and everybody is on and through a camera and on a screen. I think if you ask most pastors, and they're really honest, the whole digital aspect of the church today, and whether it's broadcasting online or having to connect with people through a screen or through social media, is not their favorite thing. In fact, I've seen most churches and pastors that I've kind of seen in communities tend to resist as long as we can. We're going to push back because we think that it gives people an excuse. Well, I don't have to show up. I don't have to go to church. And so for that, we end up resisting and pushing back. But if there is anything that this year has taught us, There's a couple things, I guess, that this year has taught us. Number one is that digital technology is important and, matter of fact, necessary in the 21st century. That if you have been resisting it, I just want to challenge you, maybe a change of mind to say, I'm actually going to embrace what's going on. Why? Because the rest of the world that you're trying to reach already has. And so you need to embrace the digital revolution that is going on, especially how it impacts the church. I know it's not a fun thing, but I would encourage you to do that. Here's the other thing, though, that that this year, 2020, has also taught me. That buildings aren't going away. Because gathering does matter. If you were to ask me, do you think that online church is as good as in-person church? I'm just going to tell you honestly, no, I don't think it's as good. I don't think it's the same as being able to gather and to be connect with each other and be in the atmosphere of worship together. No, I don't think it's as good as what being in person is. But I do believe that it is an important piece. It's an important thing to reach people in the 21st century. Now, let me just give you a few thoughts about this, okay? One of the advantages of really embracing digital technology, whether it's through your website, through social media, is this. It becomes your front door. You've heard that term before, right? Front door, it's when the guests come in through the front door of your church, your face-to-face gathering, your first impression. I would argue that for probably 90% of the people who walk through the doors of your church, that's not their first impression of you. Most of them have already looked you up on the website, has already, if you're a pastor, probably watched one or two of your messages, have already maybe looked at your social media to see what you're all about. That is actually the front door today. By the time people show up and they come in through our doors, they have already consumed a certain amount of content that we put out there, and they feel like I can be safe there, or I feel like this is something I can identify with. So the front door has moved from the physical location to online. That's number one. The second thing is this. Here's a benefit. When you create content and you post stuff online and you put it there, it actually has an opportunity to continue to grow God's kingdom 24/7 while you're sleeping. Literally, people will consume the things that you put out there. It becomes shareable. They can share clips. They can share messages with friends that they think this would encourage. And they might, 2 years later, in the middle of the night, somewhere around the world, watch something that encourages their faith. Or they may even give their lives to Christ because of something you did a year ago. I feel like we need to embrace it. If we're going to reach people in a post-Christian world, we're going to have to embrace a certain level of digital technology. During this pandemic, we were already broadcasting online. We had been for probably the previous 5 or 6 years. But during the pandemic, we ramped it up. We took it to another level. We really created an online campus. We have an online pastor, so we've designated a staff member that's their primary role for reaching people. Why did we do all that? Let me tell you why we did that. During the pandemic, when we shut down in-person gatherings, guess what happened? Our reach actually grew. We actually started to have people in our local community and around the country that started to watch the broadcast. Why? Because they couldn't go anywhere and they were looking for hope. And we literally had people that gave their lives to Christ who found us online during the pandemic watching a broadcast, who then told us they want to get baptized. And then when we came back to in-person gatherings, we baptized them. That happened because of digital technology. And they are part of our church, and they're growing in their faith. I'm telling you, it's real. Just a week ago, we received an email from a mother of a young guy who goes to our church. She lives all the way in Topeka, Washington. And she sent us an email. She said, my son been going to your church. And he would send me these notes and text messages after church. Oh, Mom, you got to hear this message. Mom, you got to hear this. Man, this has changed my life. And then he texted his mom and said, on this day, I rededicated my life to Jesus Christ because I heard this message. You've got to watch it. Well, guess what she did? She jumped on our website. She actually went back and watched an entire series that I'd preached just a couple months ago. And then she wrote us in and she said, on this day, when I watched this particular message that you guys did on this day, she said, I recommitted my life to Jesus Christ. And she has found a fresh new faith and relationship with Jesus because of digital technology. And so I would just encourage you today, if you want to grow your ministry and you care about growing God's kingdom, you're going to probably have to embrace the digital revolution. Now here's the last one, and then I'll be done. I believe to grow your church, you need to have a bet the farm faith. You need to have a bet the farm kind of faith. Have you ever heard the phrase bet the farm? It means that I'm going to put it all on the line. I'm going to risk it. And I'm just going to say this as lovingly as I can to every pastor that's watching this right now. One of the tendencies that we have often in our church is that we will get so comfortable, we want to stay so safe because we don't want to fail, that we stop risking things for God. This happens. By the way, the larger your church will get, the more likely you are to play it safe. And I got into ministry and serving God not to play it safe. In fact, in the first year of full-time ministry, when I was really frustrated, I told God in the fall of 2007, I said, God, if something doesn't change in this ministry within a year, I quit. I'm getting out. Thankfully, something did 1 year later. But in that journey, I made a pledge to God. I said, God, I will go big, and if I fail, I'll be out. I'll go home. But I refuse to play it safe when lives are at stake, when eternities are on the line. And I feel like sometimes in ministry, once you've been doing it for a little while, we can start to get safe. We won't make decisions, and we won't risk everything. And I would just challenge you to say, do you have the kind of faith that are you going to make the kind of decisions that if God doesn't show up, you might fail? See, most of us are more interested in protecting our ministry, our career, our calling, our job, our paycheck, than we are really advancing God's kingdom. Because of that, we tend to play it safe. In our journey of church growth, let me tell you, the most significant things that have happened because we went all in bet the farm. In 2008, we bought a piece of property in Lithopolis that cost us $750,000. We were a church of maybe 80 adults, 100 total people, and it took everything we had when we signed that contract to come up with $125,000 for the down payment. Honestly, I thought it was going to be impossible. We did everything we could, and God showed up in a big way, and we got the money for it, and we renovated the space. And by the time we got done renovating the space, can I tell you that not only had we spent everything that we had, but we were probably $20,000 in credit card debt. Not because we were irresponsible, because we had no idea when we got in there the problems that we would have. But let me tell you something. That fall, September 14th, 2008, when we had our grand opening launch in our new location, we'd been running 80 to 100 people. We had almost 300 people that showed up that weekend. And literally overnight, our church doubled. And that journey continued because, by the way, 6 months after that launch in 2008, we started another capital campaign. Can you imagine this? Less than 1 year, we did 2 capital campaigns. We did because we were out of room. And we had to expand our space, and we had to build a kids building and do stuff in the parking lot. Guess how much it was going to cost? $750,000. Guess how much money we had in the bank? Barely anything. We just recovered. So we went to the church and said, hey, guess what? We need to raise another $125,000. Come on, we're going to do it. We did a series. We had a big give. We were way short. I thought for sure we'd be able to do it. We did it with 80 people. We could do it with that time 300 people, right? We were way short. We had a prayer meeting. We had to come. We're going to pray. We don't know what to do. After that prayer meeting, one family walked up to me and they said, how much money do you need? I said, I don't know. I think we still need $78,000. They said, we'll write a check for it. I said, what? Boom, the impossible. That next step happened. We began to see the church. In 2012, we said that we were going to launch another location in Lancaster, Ohio. We're going to start a multi-site location. It had not been done successfully in the area. I said, we don't even know if people are going to come to a place where the pastor's on a video screen or if it would be effective. But guess what? We invested money. We sent staff. We risked everything. And because of that, after 8 years of ministry in Lancaster, we'd seen over 1,000 people declare Jesus as their Lord and Savior that hadn't before that, all because we took a risk to do that. And now here we are, and it's 2020. And a few years back, we felt led to build a facility in Canal Winchester. A facility that would cost so much money that it scared me to death. We had a company come by and say, we're going to support you, an organization say, we'll support you. We did a campaign to raise money. It got delayed for 2 years. The cost of the project went up 25%, which cost millions more. And so we started onto this project in 2018. It was either go or it was to walk away from it altogether. And I felt like we were supposed to go, and the church, the board, everybody with me. And so we went for it 2018. Guess what happened in 2020? COVID and a pandemic, and we shut down. And in the middle of the worst pandemic ever and one of the worst years I can ever imagine of life and ministry, One where there's been so much controversy in this entire year, one where we've lost people throughout the year. We're supposed to open up a brand new location, and we did this fall. And I wish I could stand here and tell you that I know where it's going to end up and how it's going to go, but I'm just telling you right now, we're living in another one of those bet the farm moments. I'm not really sure how we're going to survive in 2021 in a brand new facility in COVID time and this pandemic. I don't know, but here's what I do know. Every time we stepped out on faith, God showed up and did something. And so I want to leave you with this, and this is that challenge, and I'll be done. You can come up here, Michael. I'll get out of the way. I just want to leave you that challenge. What is that one thing that you've been afraid to do? Because if you fail, it could cost a lot. Maybe that's the very thing that God wants to use of real faith in your life to take your church and take you to the next level. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tim. That's really powerful. A few questions.
Yeah.
Don't worry about time limit. We got captive audience online. They're at home, comfortable.
They
probably.
can't go anywhere anyways.
Yeah, probably in their PJs, right? So, a couple questions.
Yeah.
You mentioned you read a lot of books,
Yeah.
despite
I don't like to read.
Yeah, exactly. Same. What are the books and authors that you've been reading this year?
Some of the books that I've been reading. By the way, I'll just say this: Audible is your friend.
Oh.
So I listen to books a lot. Read some. Emotionally Healthy Church or Emotionally Healthy Leader. And Emotionally Healthy Church have been great books that we're reading right now, just kind of lead our church through some discipleship efforts. That's one that I've been reading this year that has been really impactful. Hold on. I don't have it with me. I was going to say, I'll look at a list of them. That one was really impactful for me. Trust the Gospels was a great one as a preacher that I read this year. John Mark Comer's book. What was it called? John Mark Comer, he has a book out that's, I can't remember the title now. It was a really impactful book for my life in the beginning of the year. I just can't remember the title, but in there he talks about the need to slow down and to not run ahead full speed. And so kind of for me, it spoke to me about finding rhythm in my life and just not being consumed totally with ministry. I just can't remember that title. That one's a great book that was this year. So I don't know. There's several others. I read some for leadership. I read some just like a book I read, Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. That's about Nike and about their journey. That's one as a leader that has just been really helpful for me to identify with the kind of things that I deal with as a leader. So I don't know. You asked me so quickly.
Yeah.
I can't think off the top of my head. I wish I had my phone with me. I had Audible. I'd go through.
All right. So, growing up in the church in small town North Carolina, it's almost unheard of. I know pastors have friends that pastor other churches, but leaning on them as a network is almost a foreign concept. It feels like in ministry. So talk to me a little bit about how important that is, especially in a post-Christian world, that you have other churches and other pastors in your network.
You're going to get to hear from one of them in just a few moments. So Pastor Matt is one of my best friends in life and in ministry. I cannot tell you how instrumental it is in the journey of church growth. And here's one of the reasons why. One of the points I made earlier was that leadership is pain. And if you do not have, I would say, close friends in ministry or mentors, I have a mentor of mine that leads a church of about 10,000, a multi-site. And several years ago, when our church and our staff were going through some major change, I didn't talk about this stuff. I mean, I think in a year and a half time, we cycled 14 or 15 people off our staff. Not always for good reasons. There was a major disruption going on in our church at the time. This was right after we set the vision and the campaign to build a new facility in Canal Winchester. And it was one of the darkest and hardest times. My good friend Pastor Matt would know. I would lean on him and a good mentor of mine, Tim Liston. And I spent time on the phone with him, and I would almost need him to talk me off the ledge. I don't want to go back. Yeah. I don't know that I could cut out for this. I don't know that my best days are ahead of me. Went through a really dark season. And so I feel like it is a must. And so about once a quarter, there's 4 of us pastors in this area, all kind of have similar sized churches. We all grew up, actually. Our churches grew up together. We were all running a few, 100 when we got started. And now we've all seen them grow. And so we'll get together almost on a quarterly basis we can, and we'll literally just, we'll help each other. And so it is critical. Yeah. I mean, find somebody that you can ask to be in your life and that you can be in their life. I strongly recommend it.
Yep, I agree absolutely 100%. All right, last question.
Yep.
A lot of pastors and ministry leaders that we've got on and registered today are pastoring churches from anywhere from 60 to 100.
Yeah.
What is the most important couple of systems you think for churches that size that they need to get up and running ASAP?
I would say, if you ask me the systems, I would say your assimilation process would be the first thing I would look at. I want to know, what are we doing every time somebody will actually take the time on a Sunday, as weird and strange as it is, to go to a brand new space. I mean, I think we're so church, we don't remember what it's like for somebody to walk into a new church, a new space. So I would say your assimilation process. How are you connecting with them? How are you speaking to them? What's your follow-up process? And where are you leading them toward? It's not just, hey, we're glad you came, hope you come back. You should lead them. So we actually lead them. So we go, we entail first-time guests to stop by an area. We connect with them. We give them a card. We say, hey, your next time, bring this card, stop back by, see, we have another gift we'd love to give you. And we give them a T-shirt, and we connect with them again. And then we encourage them to go to Welcome the X, which is a once-a-month experience that we have. We always address them from the stage. They get a handwritten postcard from the first person that they talk to. They get an email during the week. They get, so there's things that we do. I would say your assimilation process is number one at that size. Absolutely critical. I would say other systems that probably really matter. When I'm trying to think back, just to that size and what we did. There's no reason why you can't have church management software in general today. Right. There's free services out there. They're inexpensive at that size. I think kids, we didn't talk about that, but like if you're kind of handwriting stuff, we have safety stickers, people checking their kids in at that size. You have to think larger. You have to think, what is it like? And the best way to do this, I feel like, is go step into a larger church. Yep. The best way to learn this stuff, you'd be surprised how many churches, we do it all the time where people come to us and go, what can we do? We don't know what to do. Hey, come hang out with us, and we'll answer any questions that you have of what we do. Look and learn from churches that are larger than yours and go, maybe we should start doing that. Let's aim for that. So I think assimilation is huge. I think just safety, your kids' ministry, church management software, basically how you do follow-up. It's really critical so that you don't, lose things in the process. So.
Man, thank you so much. Hopefully you enjoyed that as much as I did. I'm going to tell you a secret. I just pretty much threw this thing together several months ago for my benefit, and I'm hoping that it's helping you guys as well. So excited to hear from Reverend Matthew Johnson next on Effective Pulpit Ministry. We'll be back in about 10 minutes.